hey, my birthday's coming up. I think it'd be pretty cool if everybody noticed it. He'll never say that.
I don't even know how to spell compliment. Did I spell that wrong? Am I supposed to have an I right there?
Here, just do this. Okay. Oh, I smudged it. Both of you watch it and then go on a trip.
Welcome to this episode of the Youth Leader's Brain. This is Ron Perry. I'm Sam Brock. We are dealing with 5 ways for a youth pastor to help the pastor. And so, first of all, a little introduction.
Okay, I have pastored for almost 20 years, just a little over 20 years, and currently pastor at Faith Baptist Church in Folsom, California.
Folsom, he's up north, and Pastor Ron used to be my pastor, so one of my pastors along the way.
So if you'd like to know some good stories, I have some, and for $20, I will share them with you.
Yeah, and he will. That's the problem.
I'm hoping he'll pay me $50 not to share them if you'll pay me $20 to share.
I know that I'll go broke, so I'm toast. But we go way back. I mean, back when nobody really trusted us much in ministry. We were not childhood friends, but near childhood.
That implies that people do trust us in ministry now, which is not
well,
always
if they're
the
watching,
case.
maybe they do. But oh, it's fun. This is an interesting topic because before we start sharing our stuff, I think we're coming at this from 2 different perspectives. So the topic 5 ways for a youth pastor to help his pastor. I'm coming from it almost from the youth pastor thinking, how do I help my pastor out? So I'm kind of, a lot of mine as I was going through, I'm kind of looking up and saying, how can I help this guy out? And I think you're sitting there for the most part.
Yeah, mine are going the opposite direction.
Looking down saying, okay, how does this guy help me out? I'm really curious to see what our list will, as we put them out there, if they'll be similar.
Yeah, because we didn't collaborate.
No.
We haven't seen each other's stack yet.
Yeah,
so.
We don't know what it's going to be, and so I think that's helpful for you because I think what's really good about this video is that you try to understand. You probably understand where I'm coming from if you're a youth pastor sitting here watching this, and you want to get to know the mind of that pastor, understand, okay, what makes him click. And I know every pastor is a little bit different, but I'm hoping we'll hit on some common themes that you would be like, I never thought that he would be interested in that. So I'm very curious about your list. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off.
Okay.
We'll just set them out in front of us, and then we'll go from there. My number 1 is that I'm going to anticipate what makes him nervous. And so one of the things, especially as you're just getting started with a pastor, you want to listen to those things that tell you, he's very interested in this information. So if he asks you a similar question, every Sunday about what's going on, or every time you're in a calendar kind of meeting and he's asking you about things, he's giving you clues and hints about what might make him nervous. Now, you have to understand that what makes him nervous it might not have anything to do with you. Like, it might be a bad situation that he had in the past, or a concern, or maybe it does have to do with you. He's a little concerned about, have you thought about all these things? And so when I'm clued into, this is making him nervous, I need to not make fun of that, or be like, no, don't worry, you're all nervous about this, we're a little worrywart. No, he's nervous about it. And I want to kind of, the key word here for me is anticipate. Once you know what makes him nervous, then I'm going to anticipate that and try to answer some of those things. And you can literally see a pastor be like, okay, this is good.
Right.
You kind of answered those questions before he even had them. So.
Yeah, a lot of times as senior pastor, if he keeps saying, have you, and then it's followed with thought about, have you done, that's probably the clue that what you're doing has him a little nervous, and he needs his nerves put at ease.
Yeah, and don't you think it's okay for a pastor to be nervous? Like,
yeah.
like I shouldn't sit here being like, he doesn't trust me.
Right. I regularly think that in ministry, what we really are risk managers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so a senior pastor, he's just wanting to minimize as much risk as he possibly can. And sometimes his questions are not because he distrusts the people doing it. It's his way of just making sure all risk have at least been anticipated.
Right, and he is in a spot where buck stops with him. Like
Right.
ultimately, he's responsible for my actions
Right.
and what I'm
Right.
doing. So he wants to know at least what the intent was
Right.
of what we were going to accomplish. I remember this in a couple of spots years ago, and I got real frustrated that he was nervous about it because I had done nothing to deserve that nervousness. But then I realized that past history, there's just no way to get around it. Like,
Right.
and so how many youth leaders have you had over the years?
Probably 5 to 10, somewhere in there.
Yeah, 5 to 10. So he's had a lot of. There have been their fair share of failures and oops, and we didn't think about that. So there's a lot of experience represented in kind of where you're at. So he's just helping me think through.
Sometimes too, there may be something completely unrelated to, say, the youth activity or the event, but if that event goes wrong, it has significant impact on something completely, totally unrelated. So his nervousness really isn't about the youth pastor and the event. It's about this event or this situation, and he just knows this could impact it.
Yeah, sometimes that happens when, say, the pastor knows a little bit more information about something, and I'm getting all excited about some direction that I'm going, and he's like, "Woo, woo, woo."
Right.
No, I don't think that's a good idea. And I've just got to trust that maybe if he's nervous about something, maybe I should be too. Like if I can't assuage his nervousness and I can't anticipate and kind of cover it over, I need to be okay with the nervousness almost becoming a no. Like
Right.
if he's nervous on that, maybe I just need to back off, like and say it. Like, do you want me to not do it?
Right.
Well, maybe. You know,
That's helpful too. That takes a lot of weight
Right.
off of a pastor.
yeah, because you don't have to be the buck stops here.
Right.
I'm allowing you to.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead and crush this dream I had. Okay, what do you got? What's your
All
first
5
one?
of mine are fairly easy to remember. I would call them 5 B's. So
Okay.
the first one is to be a sheepdog. And we're very familiar with the term a shepherd, and a youth pastor is a shepherd, a senior pastor is a shepherd. A good sheepdog out in the field doesn't run the sheep away from the shepherd. In fact, that sheepdog does his job really well when he is making sure the sheep stay actually fairly close to the shepherd. And, when we're talking about things that make a shepherd nervous, he does get nervous if he thinks someone around him is pulling sheep that he is held accountable for away from him or moving them to another pasture. A good sheepdog is what really makes good youth pastors. And not just driving sheep back to the shepherd, but even each of us as dads, we would be uncomfortable if the youth pastor is encouraging our children, our sheep, to run somewhere other than their parent or their pastor. And so that sheepdog analogy is really helpful for me, that we are driving people to their rightful God-ordained authorities in life.
That it reminds me of a kind of, I don't have the phrase in my list. It would have been a good one to add, but that whole like stay in your lane kind of flavor, where I recognize there are dads and there is a pastor here that I need to make sure that I'm pointing back to some of those things, especially the dad. If a youth pastor takes over being dad, man, he's going to be short-lived. It's not going to last long. What do you see as the difference there between that the person who is the shepherd and the sheepdog? What are the is there a difference between the youth leader and the youth pastor? That's almost a whole different realm, but
Youth leader being like a layman in the church.
yeah,
has a
layman in the church,
full-time
right,
job.
right. There's 3 or 4 of them that kind of all working together.
I think in a similar way, it's the same, that the youth staff, maybe it's made up of folks who have a full-time job. Maybe they even have kids in the youth group.
Right.
They do their role really well when they're really running the sheep towards the youth pastor, who in that sense is the shepherd of that smaller flock. But then when you have a youth staff plus a youth pastor doing the work of a sheepdog, pushing the sheep all right back towards the senior pastor, it's multiple wins on multiple levels.
I've seen sheep moving from one pasture to the other out here in the desert, and every now and then you see that sheepdog, and he's way out on the edge. But what he's actually doing, you can see him kind of corralling 3 or 4 that were headed the wrong way, you know, and he's kicking them back to the direction that everybody is going. So that means a good youth pastor's got to understand the direction a pastor is trying to take. The whole congregation, and obviously they're going to take them in a direction that's obedient to God. But even within that, there's usually kind of something that a pastor is trying to do with that congregation in any given year.
Right. That one's been really good for me, and it's helpful. And we talked a little bit about perhaps like a freebie along the way. This isn't original with me, but I heard it a long time ago that one of the blessings of being the sheepdog is that the sheepdog gets to spend some of the most time with the shepherd. And when we have a good sheepdog mentality, and the more time we spend with the shepherd, the pastor, then we know his heart, we know his mind, we know what he thinks of the sheep, and then it actually gets easier to run the sheep towards the shepherd because we've been there, we've been with him, and we know his heart for the sheep. And there's really a privilege that comes with being a sheepdog.
Yeah, you're getting into one of my other ones here later, so we'll see what happens. Here's my second one. Keep learning from them. And when I say them, I'm talking about a pastor and his wife. And I think a lot of guys who are youth leaders, married, maybe a young family, usually younger. But I believe every pastor and his wife have some knowledge and some things that they can share. Many times this learning process is kind of orientation, I'm just getting going, but I think you just want to have it in your mind. I just want to keep on learning from him. And so even though I've been in the ministry in my job for a long time, 30 plus years, I still find myself saying, I've got to have an attitude of learning. Like I've just got to keep on questioning and asking, looking for those moments where I can be taught. And so, usually pastor and youth pastor, they're working together, together on things, but I think it's really up to the youth leader, the youth pastor, to say, okay, I want to keep on growing, and that's with questions, and it won't always be, you're not going to always, off the cuff, you're not going to get some amazing lesson, let me set you down and share these things, but you're just looking for the little things that are like, that's good, I needed that help. And so I also think that's regularly asking for me, it's a question that says, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? And when I work with other folks, I just kind of open up and say, what do you wish I did more of? What do you wish I did less of? And it's just kind of a simple question that says, I want to learn. I want to keep on getting better. And I think that helps a pastor understand that I'm very much wanting to learn from him.
Right. So. There's a little mantra. It's actually it's on my desk right now. It has this idea: share what you know, learn what you don't. And all of us in ministry, our youth can sometimes loom over us a little bit like a shadow, and it makes us a little hesitant on what we say or do. And especially for a youth pastor, he may be raising his own family, and he's trying to help families who have kids far advanced than his. We still share what we know, and we do take a learner mentality. I've actually found, you probably as well, that we gain some credibility in leadership when people see that we're learners.
Yep.
That we lose credibility if we present ourselves as knowing and not needing to learn anymore. And that's contrary to the way our brain thinks a little bit, that we think people will only have confidence if I know it all. But most people actually, they gravitate towards someone who is in the process of learning and willing to be humble enough to go through that process.
And I'm going to jump to say the pastor side. Many times that person may be a generation older than the next generation coming to do it. So I really find myself as being a generation, say, older than our summer staff. When I find a summer staff member who just really wants to learn, I just naturally want to invest more. I'm like, oh, this is a person who's going to listen to what I say. Because honestly, a generation different means that I'm not cool, and I'm just kind of set off the side, and I'm going to go run with my friends. And so this is one of the things that gives us a bridge through that relationship or through that
Right.
generation gap.
Right.
So
So I'll throw rabbit trail
yeah.
out there. I think when guys are looking for a ministry to serve in, you're not just looking how much that ministry will pay, how many kids are in the youth group. One of the key questions guys coming into entry level roles in a ministry is, can I learn from the pastor that's here?
Yep.
And if there's something about his character, there's something about his personality, maybe he's just not a good teacher. It's going to be a tough ministry to serve in if you can't learn from the person who's there.
Yeah.
And so that's a good question to ask. Can I learn from this ministry, and specifically the pastor in it?
That's quite a challenge for both the pastor and the new guy, because, man, I want this to be a good place for somebody to work. That means I've got to keep on teaching, pressure on me to keep on teaching. But I want to be, I want to be helpful in this ministry, so I got to keep on learning. The other guy on the other side. So, whew,
Right.
yeah, okay, it's a good one. Okay,
Good.
What do you got?
Okay, my next one, it'll be easy to remember, but I need to explain it a little bit. It's to be a mighty man. And most of us are familiar with the mighty men of David, and the passage, though, that specifically has regularly been a challenge for me is 2 Samuel 23, where you have a couple of really good descriptions of David's mighty men. One man is described as holding onto a sword, and he refuses to let it go. And you see another man who is willing to really lay his entire life on the line for a bean field. And then you have this really interesting situation where David says, "Oh, that I had a glass of water." And suddenly you see men running and actually risking their lives to get that water, simply because he kind of uttered a word of dealing with his appetite. And he's like, this is something I desire. And when I talk about being a mighty man, I'm zeroing in on that quality of those men, that they were willing to hear his desire and then operate off of that desire at great cost. And I put a word then here, it's the word initiative, and being a man who initiates action. And when I define initiative, I love to define it this way. It's operating off of my leader's desires, not just their demands. So a boss, senior pastor, someone in authority, if they are limited to only telling us word for word what we have to do,
The minimum requirement.
right,
You
it
gotta get
puts
past
a
this.
weight back on that authority and that leader. But if the people around him know how he thinks, how he values, what his heart's desire are on some things, it actually makes communication a lot easier. It makes teamwork a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it takes a huge weight off of that pastor, that he has people who may be operating in different rooms of the building with different ages of people. But he, kind of going back to anticipating what makes him nervous,
Yeah, exactly.
he's not as nervous if he knows people are operating off of his desires,
Well,
not just his demands.
Right. Almost what you've done here, and I'm messing it all up, but
Okay.
you've kind of given I've made the statement in a negative, like figure out what makes him nervous and don't do those things. And you've said it in a positive, be a mighty man, figure out where he's wanting to go. And I love that switch, because this is the fun work.
Right.
This is it's just miserable to work if you've got a nervous boss.
Right.
But that's really fun. I like that. So the concept there, figuring out what he wants to accomplish and what makes him tick, and yeah, that's a good
So
one.
this then, it gives a little bit of a script to a youth pastor when he's with his pastor. He's now asking questions that begin with phrases like this. So what do you think about?
Yeah.
What is important to you on Sunday mornings? Pastor, on this next youth activity or this next year, what are your goals? And the more those questions start to be asked and that pastor has the opportunity to answer them, we then get this mind full of the values, the thought processes. And then we have an ability to truly be a support, to be a sheepdog that now in their particular area of the field is operating with that shepherd's mind.
Like it a lot. Okay, here's my next one, which is gonna kind of fit some of these. I had some real basic ideas here, but share your back so he can protect it. And this is the responsibility of the youth leader to communicate. So he's got to, but he needs to communicate the things that are his back. Like he's got to think about what's going to come around backside on this thing that I'm doing. So many times a youth leader is a little bit of an innovator. He's trying something, he's making announcement to teens that get all excited about it and stuff like that. And we forget that there may be some criticism coming our way, but it normally doesn't always come to us. It comes to our wives or to the pastor. Like, do they know about this? Do they know about that? What's going to happen if this happens? So I think that anytime that you're a little bit concerned about maybe somebody you won't have enough time to share all the information, but you do need to share with your pastor all the information, maybe not all of it, but enough of it that he can be like, no, I think he's thought about that. Got a little bit of a plan there. And so it's just a mindset that a youth leader has to know where the criticisms, here's the direction the criticism is going to come. So your wife needs to know what's going on. Your pastor needs to go what's going on. If you can get your mom and dad's clued in before, you're making it, man, you've really you've got your back well protected there in that one. So it's just a concept. I didn't flesh it out as well as I'd like, but the idea is that you share those things that you might get criticized. In other words, you thought about them.
Yeah, and I would add, it's not just sharing content that could potentially impact, but making sure your timing is really is good as well. So there are some things you don't want to immediately share right before pastor goes on the platform.
Yep.
The timing of that communication is a big part.
Yeah.
So.
I'll come back to a little bit on that too.
Okay, so I'm going to.
Oh, you're gonna go out of order?
All right, so I'm going to go out of order because it goes right along with that. Mine is to be a surprise eliminator.
Yeah.
And it's just a different way of saying exactly what you did, but to be a surprise eliminator. And I put two things here that I think help with that. One is to be consistent, and in the realm of ministry, we're constantly trying to be creative and try to figure out new ways to do things. And we got to be careful that creativity never surpasses consistency. And a pastor...
Well, say that one again, because that might have slid right by
everybody. We don't want creativity to overshadow consistency.
Okay, tell us what you mean by that.
So we would rather be known for being consistent in the right things than not being consistent, but being really creative.
Correct, yes.
And to be very honest, creativity has a lot more bells and whistles. It looks better.
Yeah.
Sounds better.
It's more fun, for sure.
It definitely is. But a pastor who knows his youth pastor will be creative in that youth room, but will consistently be giving the word, that the activity may have a lot of bells and whistles to it, but there will be consistent safety. That consistency really eliminates surprise. And then the other one is communication. And like you said, it's communicating, hey, this happened, this could happen, hey, I sense that something's going on with this person, so that when that pastor enters into a conversation or a meeting, he's not caught off guard with information.
This next one is the one that I have probably answered this question more than anything else for new guys in a new spot. It is that it's okay for you to take the initiative when it comes to communication. So, and I'm not saying that this is the way it is with every pastor, but if things are going well, you have a tendency not to meet. Things are going okay, so let's just continue on that path. But what can happen is that you don't, that you lose that communication. Now, you as a youth leader, there's a chance that you are in the trench, and you're in a trench that the pastor might not know as much as you do in that trench. And you are working on calendar, so there's things that the pastor won't know about calendar, and there's process that you are putting together that he might not know. So I need to take the initiative to communicate the things I know to the pastor. And so sometimes guys think that if I'm taking it's my boss's job to have a meeting with me. And you just got to be really okay with saying, no, I just need to find out when I can fit in his schedule. And I need to do a really good job of clustering all of my questions and putting all my information. You've got to avoid that walk-by meeting. The walk-by meeting, and you mentioned it briefly, like right before the message, but pretty much any time that you're asking for decisions in a walk-by casual conversation, he's not in that mode. He's not. You want to sit down and say, can we meet? I've got a few questions. I need a few decisions from you, and pile them all up there together. There's a lot of things you can do walk by that are, smile, hey, good message. There's a lot of things you can do there, but you can't do walk by meetings and set it up. Take the initiative to get with them. So.
I think a good conversation to have with a pastor at some point is to ask him how he wants to be communicated to, because there are some things that can easily be shared by text, email, and again, we're going back to understanding how he thinks and how he operates. In that communication, you may think the easiest thing to do is to quick text a list. That to him may not be helpful at all. He's like, no, that's a sit-down type of a meeting.
Yeah.
And then finding out how best to communicate different things at different times.
Yeah, I like it when a person tells me, "Hey, I've got a pretty big problem. It's in this area." They don't have to share all the details. I just know where it's coming from, or something that I can think ahead of time. If you're expecting me to think about it and come to good conclusions in a very quick meeting, sometimes I need some time to think about that. But I don't know. All churches are going to be different. But having some regular time where you can meet once a month. It's just whatever once a year. You've got to come up with some regular time there to do to have various communication about different types of things. So,
Good.
Okay, what do you got?
Okay, before I share this next one, I have been entertaining a thought that there is a blessing to not being the man in charge. Okay, and one of the blessings to not being the man at the top of an organizational chart is that there are a lot of freedoms. There are things that people lower down on an organizational chart they don't have sitting on their mind when they go to bed at night. And so there's a freedom to that, and it posed this thought for me recently: am I stewarding my freedoms well? Am I stewarding the fact that I am free from having to worry about this or worry about that or having to figure this thing out? And so with that in mind, what do we do then in the absence of some things that I, as a second man, may have to carry? And I think it's a great place to then be an encourager and to be an individual who recognizes that the person that we are working with as a pastor has got some things on his life and shoulders that I, in a second man role, may not have. And I want to encourage them and figure out whether it's in words or notes or phone calls, texts, time, and even going back towards that being a sheepdog. At times, that second man is in a great spot to encourage other people, maybe even the church as a whole, to come alongside and to encourage their pastor. Because a pastor is going to feel really awkward at times saying, hey, my birthday's coming up. I think it'd be pretty cool if everybody noticed it. He'll never say that.
It's called whining.
It is. And never goes well for the pastor. But a second man, a youth pastor who doesn't carry some weights, has a freedom there then to say, I'm going to make one of the key pieces of my role to encourage the man that I work with.
I also think that the second man, that youth leader, may have some knowledge about what this person has done that not everybody else gets to have. You know what I mean? You're close enough. You're that sheepdog that's right there, and you saw something that the rest of the congregation isn't going to necessarily see. But I think when you notice that and appreciative of that, that kind of encourages that pastor in a work that nobody else, he knows nobody else is, in fact, he's doing it wrong if everybody else notices that work. But there is somebody that's not God who noticed that work, and so that's kind of a cool thing to do. Oh, I like that. Well, that's a good challenge for us as youth leaders to help our pastor. Wow. Okay, my last one, and I don't even know how to spell compliment. Did I spell that wrong? Am I supposed to have an I right there?
Here, just do this. Oh, I smudged it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
We're notorious for getting a few of these spellings wrong. So, complement weaknesses, obviously one
And
of
that's why people have a hard time trusting us in ministry. We don't even know how to spell.
yeah. So, but you married into good spelling, right?
Yes, that is a good, helpful piece of advice. Marry someone who complements your weaknesses. There you
There we go. We're all set. We were getting on a rabbit trail really
Yes,
quick that
yes.
Beneth is going to not want us to continue down.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So keep going. Keep
So
going.
complement weaknesses. This is okay. So you get into your job area. You're now working together, and suddenly you notice this guy isn't very good at something, and it really frustrates you because it kind of impacted your work. He's not the team player you were hoping for in this particular area, or whatever it is. You've just got to understand you're now part of a team, and so you get to take his weaknesses, and it's now your job. So now that you notice that, you can't be frustrated and say, "Man, I wish I had a perfect pastor." You don't get that, never will. And so you've got to look for those weaknesses and say, "How can I help with that?" Now, I'll say in a team, there is nothing that shows love more than when my team members know I have a weakness and they come ready to kind of shore that up, and they help me through that, and they even kind of crutch me along through the weakness, and then it just makes me now want to use my strengths to help them, and it's just so easy to get this one wrong, where suddenly the weaknesses become kind of the thing that drives us apart, as opposed to really what should bring us together. And so you just got to know that the pastor, he's probably pretty good at hiding some of those weaknesses. It's not like he's trying to just make it obvious, and it'll frustrate you more than it will everybody else because you're so close to it and you're impacted by it. But figure out how it is that I can complement that person's weakness. Just totally changes your mindset.
Right. Sometimes the weakness is humanity. We're just
Right.
we don't have talent in that area. We don't have knowledge in that area. Sometimes it's tied to our depravity that we're sinners and we have bad days and we have a flesh. And I really do believe if we can learn to patiently work with people in their weakness, the benefit that eventually comes back is they will do the same towards us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it works both ways. So. Okay, my last one is to be a ministry weightlifter. And so each youth pastor should get a membership in a gym and start lifting weights in order to be a good youth pastor. Just kidding. What I mean by that is to not let the title youth become this boundary that says, I only work with this age group. Instead, look towards the entirety of the ministry and recognize the things that are weights to the senior pastor and say, I want to go into those areas and help lift those things for him. And that's what I mean by being a weight lifter. Sometimes that title youth can be a really safe title because then we go, oh, I just have to stay right here with 7th to 12th graders. Mm-hmm. And yet you're going to walk into that auditorium and you're going to see things on a Sunday morning that don't deal with 7th to 12th graders.
Mm-hmm. Or even beyond their families.
Beyond their
mom and dad, yeah.
Right, that may even be dirty bathrooms, a sound system that's going haywire, to trash needs to be picked up during the middle of an event. There's all kinds of things that are out there, but to be the weightlifter for that pastor that says, my goal is to shoulder some things so that he doesn't have to carry as much.
I've heard some guys, like the term assistant pastor or the term youth pastor, they're like, well, I'm just the all-purpose pastor. But that's actually, that's a compliment, to be, I'm anything that is needed here, I'm going to come along and support and help. And in some sense, that's working with the youth on a regular basis. And what you're saying is don't let that define. Don't
Right.
don't let that be the walls of ministry. That's really good. For bonus material here. There's a bunch of stuff we could have gone through, but I want to talk about one issue as we've gone through all of this, and I know it's something you've done well, and I'm putting you on the spot here, and I'll talk about it, and I'll stall just a
Okay.
little bit.
All
for you.
right.
But the importance of a trip, the importance of two guys or 3 or 4 guys going on a trip together, maybe to a conference or maybe to just do something fun or something like that. I'm kind of looking at, be an encourager, a surprise eliminator, be a mighty man, a sheepdog, don't keep learning from them. Like, one of the ways that this is accomplished is that if the relationship goes beyond just kind of the office and the church walls, that at some point you go camping together, or you go on a road trip, or you
Right.
like I know we used to do that in the early days every now and then when we were working with Ministry Bound and Institute of Ministry, and we would just say, is there anywhere you need to go for like 3 or 4 hours? And we'd get in a car, and we had something that we needed to do, but
Right.
the rest of that time was kind of spent sprinkling kind of some of this
Right.
stuff out. Can you talk about like how you would use a trip or the importance of it or anything like that, especially with a pastor or a youth pastor?
Most men, if they're communicating, there's an awkwardness, say in pastor's office. He's here, and having that conversation.
Even
is-
with a cup of coffee, it's still not enough.
It's really odd. Most men don't like to make eye contact, and so what happens then in those settings is you find yourself quickly doing the list. Okay, we need to address this. We need to address this. Boom, boom, boom.
Marking stuff off.
We're marking it off, and then we're moving on. But in regards to being a mighty man who operates off of his leader's desires and not just his demands, we have to get into a setting where we have enough time to hear the person talking outside of the to-do list. And it's a time in which questions can be asked and then answered over a period of time. The other thing that a trip does, there is the kind of trip that says, okay, we're going to go out to eat, or we're going to go pick something up at Costco. There's another kind of trip, though, that is maybe more valuable, is to say, hey, Pastor, you're going to minister somewhere, or you're on a visit. May I be just kind of a guest that comes along as a quiet observer? Because when we see that person in action outside of meetings and a platform, you start to see heart. You start to hear people ask him questions, and you hear what his answers are. And those ministry trips are almost more valuable, at least from my perspective, than just the fun trip. Because then I'm not just sharing verbally my values and desires, I'm actually living some of those out.
Yeah, it seems like that's the time where I'm able to say, so what are your goals for the church the next year? I mean, what are you thinking? And now, I mean, it's an hour before we're going to stop, or we're together for a while, and we can just kind of kick that around and share ideas and really learn what's going on. I know that that's not on this list, but I would encourage you, if you're a youth pastor trying to get to know your pastor, trying to be a good help to him, trying to do some of these things, that you try to figure out how to make that happen. It's not an easy thing to figure out. A full schedule, family and work, there's a lot of things pulling both ways, but I find that the people that I really enjoy doing ministry with, we end up together in those non-work work moments.
Practical thing that helps me is to not always be living right next to deadlines, so that I'm ahead of schedule on stuff, so that when the opportunities just suddenly happens, I have enough margin to be flexible and to jump in the car with them or to go on that trip.
And that's also understanding kind of the seasons of the ministry too. There's probably a few weeks that's not going to happen,
Right.
And then there's some moments in the year where that could happen a little bit more. It's not like that's something you got to do every week or every month. These are the things that you do on occasion, and it really helps the relationship. as you work together. Well, I knew that this would be an interesting topic, and once again, you very much came from your side. This is coming from a different side, and I hope that you've kind of walked away from this video saying, okay, there's a couple things that I could do better. I would encourage you just to, in your mind, say, okay, this and this. There's two things that I'm going to take from this video and try to work with. I also encourage you, Pastor, to watch this with your youth guy. And youth guy, if you're watching this, say, hey, Pastor, I would love to do this, and I'd love for you to tell me one of these I could do better. I mean, if you want to open yourself up, this list right here.
Both of you watch it and then go on a trip.
Right. And then talk about it. So anyway, that's the Youth Leader's Brain. Thanks for watching.